Hi everyone, I'm just coming on to share this layout with you. I've got a whole bunch of scraps here that I've pulled out from Chamel's True Stories collection and also from Amy Tan's Rise and Shine collection. I've cut up a whole bunch of squares there that I'm going to use, and I've got some sort of scrap pieces of paper that I'm trying to use up. So if you have watched some of my other videos, you might know that I don't like to cut into a 12 by 12 sheet to layer up behind photos. I like to challenge myself to use some of the scraps that are available from the paper pads that I have. And basically the way that I go about this is I will put the scraps into the front of the paper pad, and then when I'm going to do a layout, I might pull out a full sheet as I have here to use as the background, but then the rest of the pieces of paper I try as much as possible to use up the scrap pieces so that, you know, I'm using up those bits and pieces, and it means that my paper pads last longer. So one of the ways that you can do this, if your scraps aren't quite big enough to layer behind your photo, is to trim them in half and stretch them out behind the photo. So there will be a gap behind the photo, but it doesn't matter because you can't see it, and they end up appearing like there's one long strip of paper. So you'll see me do it again here, where I look at where that measures up, and then I'll trim that paper, not in half, but just cut it half, so that some can sit on the left hand side and some can sit on the right hand side of the photo, and just gives that appearance that it's one long strip of paper, but actually I've cut it in the middle to stretch it a little bit further. So just looking at layering up the papers behind the photo, I do want to have that banner at the top left, and the idea will be that these squares that I've cut out will cascade from the banner down to the photo. So today's layout has been inspired by Moira O'Reilly, who's a member of a Facebook group that I am part of, and it's Mercy Tiara's 27-day challenge. So Moira shared this layout probably about a month ago now on the Facebook group, and I really liked the way that it worked. I'm usually not someone who uses a lot of paper and has a busy kind of layout, but I like the look of this layout and I thought it would be a great way to challenge myself, and so I decided to give it a go. I've taken the elements of layering the papers behind the photo. You're going to see the cascading of those square papers, which sort of end up sort of in a triangle pattern, and the banner at the top left, and they're probably the main things that I've taken from her layout. She did use blue, but it's sort of, you know, I would use blue anyway, so the colours are fairly different. And I don't think she used a square photo either from memory. So the photo I'm using today is a 5 by 5 inch square photo, and I've given it a white border when I printed. So you can see this is that technique I was talking about, where I'm actually not layering or not putting the papers in one strip. I'm actually spreading them out, and you can see that really extends that yellow paper with the love hearts. One of my favourite papers, actually, that one from Amy Tan's collection. And so I do try and stretch it as far as possible because I really want to be able to use a whole lot of it. So I'm just doing the same thing with that cream and red striped paper from Chamel as well. So once I get the layering right behind the photos, then I'm going to start working on the different areas. So I could have done this two ways. I could have done the cascading sort of diamonds or squares down the page first, but I really wanted to make sure that the photo was still the centerpiece of the page, and so that's why I wanted to get that down first. Otherwise you run the risk of adding all of that embellishment down the page, and then there's not enough room for the photo, or it almost sort of falls off the page. So I wanted that to sort of be the core thing that you see on the page. Didn't want to lose that at all. So once I've got that in place, then I start playing around with these squares. Now, I say squares, but they are actually more of a diamond shape because the patterns on most of these papers are actually like have a direction. I did cut them in a diamond shape so that the patterns were actually facing the right way. So particularly those love hearts and the numbers were cut in that sort of diamond shape. The others didn't really matter too much. So I do play around with this for a little while because I struggled to make this work. I wanted to, I didn't use any measurements from Moira's layout, so I just went ahead and cut my own squares based on, I don't even remember what it was. I think I did like 2 inches by 2 inches, or maybe 1.5 by 1.5 inches, but I didn't really have a look at what she had done to make it work, and so then I had to try and make it work with the squares that I had cut. So I was just playing around with how that might work. I really wanted it to look like it was cascading. I didn't want it to look too uniform. I didn't want things to line up too much, and so that's why I'm starting to sort of play around with where things are. And I also didn't want the patterns to be too similar, so I didn't want, you know, one pattern on the other side of another piece of paper, so I was trying to break up the patterns as much as possible as well. And I think that there wasn't as much space to work with as perhaps in Moira's layout, possibly because I used the 5x5 photo, or possibly because I cut my squares a little bit bigger, but yeah, it really did struggle to lay these down, but once I'd played around with it for a little bit, it worked in the end. So just, you'll see me playing around with that for a little bit more. Yeah, so I really quite enjoyed doing this layout. It was something a little bit different, and you know, sometimes I don't use sketches very often, but I definitely get inspired by seeing other people's pages and sort of saying to myself, I really love how that page looks. I'd like to do something like that in my own kind of version. So it's not so much that I will copy exactly everything that they're doing, but I'll definitely take a couple of elements from the page and say, these are the things I really liked about that layout. I'm going to try and recreate that in my own way. And that's pretty much what I did here. So just playing around again with where those squares might go, and then I will, I think, still play around with those for a while. But yeah, looking for that cascading effect is really the main thing, and making sure I don't have sort of a pattern of the patterns going on either. So that's where I pulled that blue one out. So you see me switch these out for a while. I love the photo, and I don't normally print my photos 5x5, but I did select this day that I printed these photos, I did select a few of them that were my favourites to print in a 5x5, just I think, and a white border to just make it a little bit different to what I'm used to. I haven't scrapbooked all of them that I did print like that. I've still got a few that I need to do. But I think it's nice to challenge yourself to do something a little bit different, and I think it, you know, really stands out on the page really well, particularly with that white border, and will sort of jump out within the album as well, because it, you know, each album will look fairly uniform with 4x6 photos, and then every now and then you'll come across a page that has a 5x5. So I've also die cut this word using a Chamel die from, I don't know which collection that came out with that die set. It might have been the Lovely collection, so her first one. I don't know that that's its official name, but that's what I always called it. And I toyed with the idea of actually curving that text, and then decided I would just stick it down straight. So now I'm looking at cutting out some of these circles. This is from Amy Tan's paper pad, and I love this paper. The only thing I don't love is that they only included one sheet in the paper pad. I think I could have used this paper over and over and over again. I love the design of the circles. I love the fact that you can use them to create an embellishment cluster. They create a sort of great background. They're nice sizes, beautiful colours that do match well with Chamel's collection. So just off camera I kind of trimmed those down so that I could embellish with them, and I also cut out some cameras that you can see down the bottom there. They came from Chamel's paper pad. So I tend to purchase paper pads that do have sheets in it that can be cut apart, whether they be like small repeating patterns like the cameras, or sort of repeating patterns like the circles, or whether they be those like sheets that you can actually cut down into sort of journaling boxes and things like that. So I find that if you can get a paper pad that has at least a couple of those sheets in there, then you don't have to spend too much on embellishments to create great pages. So if you were just starting out in scrapbooking and you didn't really want to spend a whole heap of money, my best piece of advice would be to look for a paper pad where you can pretty much create some interest in different layers and shapes and things like that just within that paper pad, so that you don't have to buy the embellishment set that goes with it, and you don't have to add any sort of extras. If there's letters in there, great, because you can cut it apart and use that for your titles. So thinking about that as much as possible when you're looking at starting out, it might be worth just buying a paper pad collection and then you know, cutting those up in different ways to be able to use it on a layout. So I'm just adding a flare badge that says love, which I think is really cute, and that's from a set that I purchased from Big W. I can't think of the name of it, but they were really cheap, so I was super excited by that purchase. And I've added those cameras. So because I'm only using a flare badge on that bottom right hand embellishment, that camera, it has been added flush to the page, so with no dimension. The other two cameras are sort of like the dimension on their embellishment clusters, so they've been added using foam squares just to help lift it off the page. So I'm just pulling out some words or some thickers now. Originally I was thinking about leaving the word lovely as the title, but I felt like it didn't kind of stand out on the page enough, and so I really needed to think about how else I could add a title. Unfortunately, most of my sort of blue toned thickers have glitter, and so I didn't want to add any glitter to this layout because it is really that pastel sort of look. So I ended up pulling out these thickers, and they are called Index is the name of the thicker, and they're in a craft colour. So playing around now with how I might do this title, I want the title to say My Boys, but I didn't want it all in the same font. I would have loved the My to be in a really scripted font. I think a scripted font with really blocked letters is a great look, and I would have loved to have My in a really kind of scripted font, but when I looked through my thickers I really didn't find anything that was going to work. So I think I do it off camera, but you'll see in the still shots at the end what I end up doing. But I end up moving the boys as well because I'm not happy with where that sits. And now I'm just thinking about how I'm going to finish off the layout. So I leave it there for now, but it doesn't stay there, that boys. No, I move it now on camera. And I also end up adding the word My using a different alpha. But at the moment I'm thinking about how I can kind of finish off the layout now, and I decide I'm going to add some mist to that sort of cascading effect to help your eye kind of follow that line. And I also end up using some Nouveau Crystal drops, and I think the colour is Royal Blue. Sorry, navy blue is the colour, so it's a lot like that dark blue that you can see on part of the layout. And also I use liquid pearls, so like a white liquid pearl in the same way to create some enamel dots to kind of follow that cascade. So I start doing it on camera and then decide that you probably don't need to see that, so yeah, you'll just see that in the still shots at the end included, as well as the word My added to the title. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and if you haven't already, subscribe if you'd like to see more videos. I definitely want to thank Moira O'Reilly for the inspiration for this layout. I really love how it turned out, and I think it showcases the photo just beautifully. So thanks again for watching, and yeah, Check out the still shots at the end. I'll give you a couple of close-ups of the things that you didn't see as I was recording, and yeah, I'll definitely catch you in the next video.